Hi everybody, we're here in Columbia, Tennessee at the offices of Mule Day. We're with Louise Mills, the Public Relations Director for Mule Day and the office manager here. I'm so excited to talk to her about the history of Mule Day. It's something that I personally love. But I was a little bit curious about it when we first moved here in 2008. I was like, Mule Day, what is this? But of course, we attended Mule Day, learned more about the history of the event, and I was all in. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. I think especially for like people who've just moved here. I mean, even since 2008, Maury County has changed so much. And I think about people who just moved here and might not understand the agricultural history of Maury County. And I think Mule Day is a really good introduction to that. So can you tell me a little bit about, I guess, the kind of prehistory of Mule Day? So we think of Mule Day as this kind of celebration, but really it started as like a sale day, right?
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I'd be glad to. And of course, the history has been passed down from generation to generation, and there's a little bit of literature out there on it. But the gentleman that started Mule Day many years ago, it wasn't called Mule Day, it was called Trader's Day, and it wasn't for a weekend, but it was like on a Monday. And the farmers knew once a year, around April the 1st, they would come to Columbia, Tennessee, either to buy new mules to take them home with them, or sometimes they would have mules that they had bought the previous year, and they would bring them back and sell them as trained mules. And then the next farmer would take them out on the farm, and he would work them for as long as he wanted to. And then when he had finished working with them, he may bring them back the next year and sell them all over again. So it was a reason for having mules on the farm because they worked the crops, and that was very important in those days because there were no tractors.
Right. So I think what's really interesting about this kind of early history of the Traders' Days is it coincides with the quarterly court session. So it's like the beginning of April, there's going to be quarterly court, people are coming to town, and I mean, I guess it kind of is right there at the beginning of the agricultural season, is that right?
Right,
so it's
right, in the spring, in April, yeah, when everybody are thinking about planting their crops and getting their year started.
Yeah, so it's the kind of like everything converges at the beginning of April, and it's the perfect time to be buying and selling mules to take back to your farm and use for your crops. So you mentioned this is before tractors, so as tractors become more common then into the 20th century, people are using mules less and less.
Exactly.
And does this kind of play into the decision to start this kind of Mule Day celebration in the 1930s?
Well, that probably had a lot to do with it. They started, I'm sure they probably had some kind of parade back in the 1800s, but they would have the street parades as time went on, and as you mentioned, in the 30s, yes, that's probably when the street parades began. And so then they would come to town and they would do their buying and trading and selling, and at the same time, they would have a parade. And from what I have been told, there would be a district or several districts in the area, and they would elect their own queen. And then this queen would come to town to represent their district, and they would have attendants and pretty girls from their community to adorn a float and go down the street and parade by.
Yeah. So are there like records and things from these early Mule Days that tell us more about, what their thought process was or why they...
There probably are a few things at the Maury County Library.
Okay.
I'm sure there's not a lot of stuff that's written about it, but after the 30s and in the early 40s, and then there came a time when I guess everybody was busy and they kind of lost interest in having a Mule Day festival, a Mule Day parade. So it was discontinued during those war years.
Right. So it started in 1934. they canceled it in 1941 and throughout World War II. And then they picked it back up again in 1947, but from what I could tell, around 1950 is when they stopped.
Right. It just, there didn't seem to be enough interest to carry it on.
Okay. So in the 1970s then, the Bridal and Saddle Club decided to revive this event, right?
Right.
So I'm really curious, before we get into that, can you tell me a little bit about the Bridal and Saddle Club and what else they do aside from Mule Day? Or, I mean, is Mule Day, I guess, is such a big thing. Is that the main thing that the Bridal and Saddle Club does?
Well, we actually, it takes a year or more of planning by a 32-member committee.
I bet.
And we work all year on that. So as far as anything else we do, in our club, we do have horse shows, and we have events for our members, that kind of thing. But our Mule Day is our biggest project because I don't think we could crowd another one in.
So what in the 1970s do you know, I mean, what was it that made the members of the Bridal and Saddle Club want to bring Mule Day back?
Well, there were a group of men in the county, still farmers, some businessmen, but the Maury County Bridal and Saddle Club was looking for that project. And so these guys got together and tossed out some ideas, and one of the guys said, well, why don't we try to bring Mule Day back? So they got together, did that. They had very few people to start with, but they had enough people to make them realize they wanted to continue to do it. So that's what we've done, and that's how we've come this far.
Okay.
And it's grown every year. And they started out with just no money at all. But they've built it and built onto it and added to it, and now it's a big festival.
What about your favorite memory of Mule Day? And maybe it's not Mule Day specifically, but the process of being involved in Mule Day. I mean, what's your favorite memory?
Well, once the Grand Marshal is selected by the committee, by the parade director, then my job is to take it from there and work out all the logistics and everything pertaining to that Grand Marshal. And we've had some wonderful Grand Marshals. But I guess my most memorable one was George Lindsay. And do you know who George Lindsay is? Goober?
Okay. I'm somewhat familiar.
Okay, maybe he was a little bit before your time.
A little bit.
But he was wonderful.
Okay.
Absolutely wonderful. Came the first year on his own, and they were doing some taping here. And then I approached him about being Grand Marshal, and he said, I'd love to. So from, remember Andy Griffith?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he was on lots of his shows.
Okay.
So he was just fabulous, and I'll never forget him. In fact, we even continued that relationship because he would call on the phone, and my husband would answer the phone, and he'd say, "Hello, can I speak to Louise? This is George Lindsay." And that's just a little bit I threw in there. But that was
name drop a little bit.
Yeah,
okay.
that was a unique thing. Yes, we enjoyed that.
Now, what do you hope that future generations will see in this, will take from this? What do you hope that this will inspire for, like, our children?
Well, as time goes on, of course, the mule is not really used for the purposes that it used to be on the farm, because now the tractors do it, and so the mule is primarily just used for show. But I hope that we can continue this and keep teaching the young people, this is where it started, this is where it is now, but never forget where your history is. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of young people that are interested in preserving Mule Day. So I think when I'm gone and part of the other group is gone, we've got a lot of young people in our group, so I think it will be carried on for as long as possible.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. So real quick, Can you explain to us what is the difference between a mule and a horse? So a mule it's a cross between a horse and a donkey. So the horse is the mule's mother, is that right?
The mare. The
Okay.
mare is the horse.
You can
And-
tell I don't have a lot of
Okay.
horse and mule experience,
Okay.
which is fine.
The mare is the horse, and the jack or the donkey is the father.
Okay,
And so therefore comes a mule.
right.
So
So how do you tell the difference between a mule and a horse? Because I feel like every year on Mule Day, I get a good handle on this, and then I forget it the next day.
see these predominant ears?
Yeah.
Okay, a horse ear is probably about that tall if you stop and look at them.
Okay,
That's one of the things. And their face is totally different.
okay,
The face, it'll have a totally different shape. Sometimes a horse will have a long neck. Generally, mules don't have a neck quite that long. And I don't know how to explain it to you, but their body, a mule is more round, a horse may be longer, and they're usually bigger. Now, there are some big mules out there, but they're totally different. If you put them side by side,
okay,
they're totally
okay,
different.
okay. So if I'm looking at them side by side, I'll be able to
But
tell.
the main thing to look at is the ear.
The ears, okay. You know, I was reading that, one of the reasons why a mule would be preferable to, say, a horse is that the mule is, I guess, like steadier,
Yes.
can do, crops that are planted closer together. It can kind of keep those lines better.
Yes.
And I just thought that was so interesting. I never would have really thought about it. Not knowing a whole lot about mules and horses, if you were to ask me, between a mule and a horse, which one is going to keep like steadier, smaller lines, I don't know, I guess I would have thought a horse. But
Well, you know that the mule is the animal that they use to go down into the Grand Canyon.
yeah,
And that's the reason for that is a horse gets excited, and a horse might back up or back off a cliff. The mule never gets excited. He's sure-footed. He's going to take care of himself. He's never going to do anything deliberately that's going to hurt himself.
mm-hmm.
A horse is a little bit different. They can be hyper, and they can go just haywire at a split second. So, for my money, be on that mule.
So to keep up with the latest information about Mule Day and about the Bridal and Saddle Club and their efforts in the community, you can go to the website, you can send them an email or a phone call, but probably the website's going to be the best stop
Right.
for people,
Mhm.
their first stop for information. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I feel like
Thank
I
you.
learned a lot.
Thank
So.
you.
Thanks for joining us today. I had a great time talking with Louise Mills of the Maury County Bridal and Saddle Club about the history of Mule Day. And I realized as I was preparing for this episode and speaking with Louise that there's just so much more to say about the history of mules and the history of the mule trade. So our Patreon subscribers are going to get special access to what is basically going to be a deep dive on the history of mules and the mule trade. So we get a better idea of why any of this matters, not only to the history of our community, but also to the history of our country. So I hope I'll see you guys at the end of the month. Head on over to our Patreon page. You can sign up and you'll get access to that in a couple of weeks. But I hope I'll see you next time.